Hello, and thank you for attending this session of the National Foreign Language Center's Apart But Together Expanding Our Community Virtual Summit. Today I'm going to be talking about growth mindsets and how we can use them to grow proficiencies. My name is Jessica Kelly. I've been a public high school teacher of Spanish and Russian for the last 8 years. If you have any questions or comments, you can find me at @SeñoraKellyLHS on Twitter or at jkelly@lexington1.net. So before we begin, I want you to take a moment and think of one aspect of language that you have to teach every single year. And no matter how you teach it, your students tend to be frustrated and want to give up. I want you to kind of jot it down and take a second, maybe pause the video and think about the emotions in that moment. What are your students saying and feeling? What are you saying and feeling? Why is it such a frustrating experience for you and your students? Okay, so take a second, jot that down. We'll come back to it. Every day, we have things that are going to either reduce or enhance our ability to learn and acquire new knowledge because our brains are constantly changing every second of every day. The more we joggle the brain and disrupt the status quo, the more we're going to draw attention to something because building connections in those neural pathways requires frequency. We can't just visit something once. We need to constantly re-trigger and reactivate that neural pathway for it to be relevant enough for our brain to retain it. So whoever does the most talking on task in the classroom is the one who's paying the most attention and learning the most. So think about your own classroom. Who's doing the most talking in the target language? Who's doing the most on task talking in the target language? And think about what that means as a reflection of learning. When we talk about stress, there's 3 levels of stress response. There's positive stress that provides brief increases in heart rate, mild elevations in stress hormone levels, and resources. Tolerable stress is going to be a little bit more serious, but still temporary. And then we have toxic stress. This is going to be a prolonged activation of stress response symptoms in the absence of protective relationships and resources. And research has shown that stress negatively affects social judgment skills, lifelong health, IQ, attendance, attention, focus and concentration, and cognition, creativity, and memory. So what can we as teachers do to lower stress? Another key thing is to not dismiss overreactions and underreactions. We may think that we're giving them this minor task and our kids may absolutely blow up and overreact and have this meltdown over it because they have so much already on their plate that our tiny little assignment just sent them over the edge and imploded everything. Okay, so when they overreact, don't dismiss that. You need to give it validity and help them work through it. Another thing is to not dismiss the underreactions. When we notice that a child is underreacting to things, they may just be so overwhelmed that they can't even process the information that they're receiving. Some other things that we can do, the power pose, one of my colleagues actually does every single day with her students, and they absolutely love it. She has reported incredible things. Whenever you're giving intense cognitive activity, they found that music at 60 beats per minute is actually very positive for the brain. You can do desk-ercise and brain breaks to kind of shake things up when you notice your students are getting overwhelmed and give them time to kind of decompress and de-stress. And really, we need to be realistic about what we expect students to remember. Another thing we can do to lower stress is increase status. The brain is driven for and by status. And if we can't get it in a positive way, we're going to get it in a negative way. Every child is going to do something at some point that is positive. And if you can catch it and praise it in that moment, they're more likely to give you future positive things that you can praise. So some ways that you can increase status, as silly as it sounds, give classroom jobs. I created a revolving classroom job poster that my high school students absolutely loved, and they would argue and get excited about whatever job they had that day. Some examples, I had an electrician who was responsible for turning on and off the lights. I had a gatekeeper whose job it was to open and close the door anytime it needed to be opened or closed. I had a class photographer whose job it was to catch learning moments throughout the day. And they would email me the pictures with captions and I would post it on our class Instagram. And the most fun one was the classroom cat. And it sounds incredibly silly, but it was their favorite. The classroom's cat's job was whenever someone came in, whether it was just a student dropping something off or whatever, if that door opened and it was not a member of our classroom, they had to quietly say cat in the target language over and over and over again. As soon as I decided it had gone on long enough, I would say, is there a cat in the room in the target language? And the entire class would meow. And so, at that moment, everybody knows there's someone in there. And it's a fun way to break things up. And the kids absolutely loved it. And also, you just need to get to know your students' interests and give those interests validity by asking them about them often and attend any student events whenever possible. And the key really is to increase hope. Language learning is personal, okay? So the ability to express oneself intelligently is often interpreted as true intelligence. So we always have those students who just get so frustrated because they have a great answer, they know the answer, but they can't communicate it. We need to be respectful of that. Our students, especially at the novice level, are going to get so frustrated if they can't prove their intelligence. Because if we don't have hope, we're not going to put forth effort. Before you assign homework, you need to make sure that there is a clear academic purpose. Will it enhance learning? Not just regurgitate, reinforce, but enhance learning. Is it high quality? And is it doable for all of your students? Okay, so think about your lowest level student. Are they going to be able to do a homework assignment on their own without supports? If the answer is no, you do not need to assign it. But is it high quality enough that your highest achieving student is going to get something out of it and it's not just busy work? It's a very delicate balance. Is it personally relevant and can the students customize it? Also, homework should never cause students to fail. If your students are failing your class because they're not submitting homework assignments, you're doing your students a disservice, because homework should never harm economically disadvantaged students. Not all of our students are going to have the luxury of having time to do homework at home. It could be that as soon as they get home, they're having to take care of their siblings, cook, clean, and take care of the home because their parents are working double shifts. Not all of our students are going to have access to technology at home. Not all of them are going to have Wi-Fi at home. Some of them may be working jobs, okay? We cannot harm them if they are unable to do homework. It should not be a worksheet. If your students can copy off someone else's homework and turn it in, it's not worth doing. It should be interactive whenever possible. It should be performance-based. It should increase content literacy skills, and it should never feel like extra work. Your students should see the value of it, that if they look at it, they know exactly why you've assigned it and they can see the importance of it, and it should be new experiences. It should never be regurgitations of things that you've already done in class. It should be new experiences. So when we talk about examples of good homework, if you're required to give something, personally, the only homework I give is if they have to prepare for presentations or interpersonal. But if you're required to give something for homework, give them homework that is going to track concepts visually or document ways that they demonstrate targeted material. So give them the can-dos for your unit and have them create some sort of portfolio or journal or diary where they're demonstrating that they can do that target. You can also incorporate service learning. They could make personal goals in the language. I want to be able to do X, Y, Z by this time and chart their progress towards that goal, but they need to always reflect on what they did that was successful, what they would change next time, things like that. They could also create homework that teaches materials, so make study guides or visuals to help with studying later. They could find connections beyond what has been explicitly taught and personalize learning. So if you've taught about hobbies or activities, tell them to pick their specific hobby and find 10 vocabulary words that are necessary in order for them to talk about that hobby. So then they're personalizing their learning and getting things that are meaningful for them rather than just regurgitating things that you force them to learn. They should always incorporate as many modes and intelligences as possible, because the key is we really want to make the learners feel like they're the expert. One example of this is to have them find authentic resources for your class and then use those later. So for example, if you're talking about food, tell them to find a menu in the target language from a target language culture. And then the next day, as a bell work or an activity in class, have them analyze those authentic resources and use them for a specific task, so then there's a purpose to why they're gathering this information. And you should always provide multiple options. Whenever we give students options, that's how they truly develop ownership of their learning. In addition to not grading homework, you need to consider allowing retests, retakes, and redos for 100% full credit. Hear me out. When we allow students to redo something, that is one of the most powerful teaching tools that we have. So if a student turns in something and you know it's translated, have them redo it. Give them feedback so they can correct it themselves. They can learn so much by correcting their own mistakes. They may notice patterns of things that they're doing over and over again to save you time later. They're going to realize that they're making this mistake, and they'll start to change and adapt and reflect when they do future assignments and maybe not make the mistake anymore. So please consider allowing them to retest or retake or redo for 100% credit. Now, it gets a little more difficult with interpretives. I recognize that, because for a true interpretive, it would need to be unseen. It's going to take some time, and I know it's more effort on your part, but the learning that happens in these retake moments is so incredibly valuable. So, getting down to the bulk of this, what is a growth mindset? Before we discuss it, I'm going to have you guys take a quick little quiz. Number 1, your intelligence is something very basic about you that you can't change very much. Do you agree, mostly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? Number 2, you can learn new things, but you can't really change how intelligent you are. Number 3, no matter how much intelligence you have, you can always change it quite a bit. And number 4, you can always substantially change how intelligent you are. If you agreed more with questions 1 and 2, you have a fixed mindset. If you agreed more with 3 and 4, then you have a growth mindset. But I want to show you that growth mindsets are not just about academics. Okay, so let's do a couple more questions. You're a certain kind of person, and there's not much that can be done to really change that. No matter what kind of person you are, you can always change substantially. You can do things differently, but the important parts of who you are can't really be changed. You can always change basic things about the kind of person that you are. So if you agreed with questions 1 and 3, you have the fixed mindset. If you agreed with questions 2 and 4, you have a growth mindset. The fixed mindset makes you concerned with how you will be judged. The growth mindset makes you concerned about improving. A fixed mindset student will say that looking smart is the most important thing. A growth mindset student says that learning is the most important part. To a fixed mindset person, effort is negative. When I work hard at school, it makes me feel like I'm not very smart. So the more effort you have to put in, the less intelligent that you are. A growth mindset person, effort is positive. The harder you work at something, the better you will be. So imagine that you're one of your students. You signed up to learn a new language, and a few classes into the course, the teacher keeps calling on you and asking you question after question after question. A fixed mindset person is going to feel so anxious. Your ability is on the line. You can feel everyone's eyes on you. The instructor's evaluating you. If you don't get every single answer right, people are going to think less of you and think that you're stupid or you're not talented or you're terrible at learning languages. A growth mindset person is going to say, I'm a beginner. That's why I'm taking this class. I am here to learn, and the teacher is a resource for learning. So the more that they're asking me and giving me opportunities to engage, the more opportunities I have to be successful. The growth mindset is based on the belief that your basic qualities are things that you can cultivate through your efforts. So essentially that everyone can change and grow through application and experience. A person with a growth mindset believes that one's true potential is unknown and that it is impossible to foresee what can be accomplished through years of passion, toil, and training. If you believe that you can develop yourself, then you're open to accurate information about your current abilities, even if it's unflattering, so that novice learner knows they're not going to know everything, that they're going to get things wrong, and they're okay with it, even if it means that they have to be corrected in public. So think about your teacher evaluations. Think about the last one that you got. Did you get any unflattering feedback? How did that make you feel? If you were embarrassed or frustrated, or you just had all these negative feelings, that might be a sign that you have a fixed mindset. A growth mindset person is going to look at that feedback and say, well, I have honest feedback of what I'm doing and where I can improve, because we all have areas that we can improve. We're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect, and that's okay. We're going to have moments where things are better than others. What is important is how we react to those challenges. If we get negative feedback and an observation and we completely shut down, you're missing opportunities for future growth. So take that feedback with a grain of salt if necessary, and be able to grow and learn and challenge yourself to be a better teacher. Because if you're oriented towards learning, then you're going to crave that accurate information about your current abilities in order to learn more effectively in the future, or in order to teach more effectively in the future. When we talk about fixed and growth mindsets, the big thing is what happens when you face a challenge or face adversity. A fixed mindset is going to give up. They may retreat to comfort zones. They may blame others, try to feel superior. They may shut down and disengage when things get hard, because looking smart or looking perfect is the most important thing. Effort is a negative, terrible, horrible thing. You should never have to put effort into anything. Everything should be effortless, easy, a breeze. A growth mindset is going to have a desire to learn. So they hit that wall and they're like, ooh, that wall was hard, but we're going to climb it. Okay, they're going to apply more effort. They're going to have a higher self-efficacy, so they're going to feel better about themselves in the long run, because they're going to understand that they don't have to be perfect as long as they're making strides to be a better person in the end. They're going to look for opportunities to learn and improve, because the goal is to learn and improve. They're willing to try new things. They're going to be more creative, more daring, more willing to put themselves out there, because effort is a good thing. The more effort that they're putting into things, the more learning they know is taking place. Fixed and growth mindsets is something that was developed by the researcher Carol Dweck, and she did a study looking at brainwaves. They tested people with both mindsets, and they answered hard questions and got feedback. They monitored the brainwaves to see when the brain was interested and attentive. So people with fixed mindsets were only interested in the feedback on their ability. Their brainwaves showed them paying close attention when they were told whether their answers were right or wrong. But when they were presented information that could help them learn, there was no sign of interest. Even when they'd gotten an answer wrong, they were not interested in learning what the right answer was. Only people with a growth mindset paid close attention to the information that could stretch their knowledge. They prioritized learning, not the results. The most important message that I can tell you today is that you can change your mindset. When we think about changing mindsets, we need to think about what we're praising. When we praise intelligent, we're going to have a negative impact on learning. If we just say, oh, you're so smart, we're going to create a fixed mindset. Our students are going to be afraid to make mistakes, because if they make a mistake, they're not going to be smart and intelligent and perfect and incredible, and then they're not going to get that praise anymore. They're going to lose that self-esteem. When we praise intelligence, it's also valuing speed. You did that so quickly. You must be smart. It's going to create defensiveness about degrees of success. So these are kids that are just obsessed with scores. I got a 97. Well, how can I get 100? They're worried so much about score that they don't care whether or not they actually master it. They just want to see that number on the report card that is going to make them feel like they are smart and intelligent. It's also going to create low confidence and motivation when they get those difficult tasks. Their performance is going to drop significantly, and that's going to have long-term effects. When we praise effort, we're valuing improvement over time. We're fostering that growth mindset and focusing on mastery of something. We're going to praise that struggle and persistence. You worked so hard and it was so difficult, but you got through it. You stuck with it. You were incredible. You're amazing. Okay? We're going to build that confidence and that self-efficacy and motivation so that when they meet another difficult task, they're going to do so much better. What are we going to praise? We need to praise effort, struggle, and persistent Persistence, especially in the face of setbacks. Great effort. Who had a terrific struggle? As I struggled saying terrific. Great persistence. There were so many hard things that you worked through. You took so many steps to get to the right answer. You worked so hard. That was incredible. We need to praise strategies and choices and choosing difficult tasks. Okay, so not just taking the easy way. You chose the hardest task on here and it probably kicked your butt, but you worked so hard and look at how much you've mastered as a result. You kept trying difficult things until it worked. Great choices. You chose a hard task. You're going to learn so much through this. We need to remember the power of yet. I'm not good at this yet. I can't conjugate and preterite yet. I tried this, but it didn't work yet. Because the key to motivation, we need to figure out what is going to motivate our students and use it, channel it to get them to opt in rather than to opt out, especially in the face of difficulty. Okay, so we have this thing called the expectancy value theory. Okay, so students are going to put more effort into activities that they simultaneously perceive to have value and at which they expect to succeed. So this is drawing in that hope. They have hope that if they put in all this hard work, it's going to be worth the effort. We have attainment value, which is personal importance of doing well and how it relates to identity. There's also intrinsic value, or the enjoyment an individual gets from undertaking a task. And there's also the utility value, or how well a task relates to current or future goals. So it's going to serve them in the future to know this. So it's worth putting in the effort, okay? So we can also talk about social-emotional value. Does it have a purpose? So the student values the thing because others believe it to be valuable. There's intrinsic value. Is it something that they need? The student values the thing that itself, usually due to out-of-school experiences. They might say, I need to learn Spanish because my coworkers speak Spanish and I need to be able to communicate to them, or my customers are going to speak Spanish. I need to be able to reach out and communicate effectively. And there's extrinsic. Do you gain a reward or reinforcement? So the student values a reward like good grades or positive reinforcement or peer regard. But we also have to factor in cost, the negative results of participation. Could be loss of time, could be loss of opportunity. If we have high value with high expectancy of success, that's going to be our highest motivation. If we have low expectancy of success but high value, it could vary. It's going to depend on the strength of the value. If we have low value but high expectancy of success, they're just doing enough to get by. These are our cruisers. They know they're not going to have to put a lot of effort in, but they're still going to get the result that they want. And low value, low expectancy of success, they're probably not even going to bother. Students need to see the value in what they're learning and, more importantly, have the confidence that they can complete the activity successfully. Students have to experience success before they can expect it. Don't wait until a student is perfect to reward them. Recognize and reward every tiny improvement. The general rule of thumb is 8 personalized positives for any one negative feedback that you would ever give a student. So, how to increase student success? Make sure that the activities are challenging but attainable. There need to be frequent opportunities for reflection. There needs to be clear and reasonable criteria. You need to provide qualitative feedback, provide complete examples of what you're expecting, and provide opportunities for collaborative work. I had this group of students. It was a Spanish 3 CP. And it did not matter what I did. They would not conjugate correctly. These kids were just so incredibly frustrated. Anything I gave them, it was, oh, I can't do this. Oh, I'm terrible at Spanish. It was a nightmare. I learned about growth mindsets and I decided, you know what? We need to just take a minute. So we had a day where we didn't do any Spanish. I gave them a growth mindset quiz. Without telling them anything about what growth mindsets were, I had them take this quiz and then interpret the results. So then I showed them this video, okay, explaining the difference between growth and fixed mindsets. And we talked as a class, like, is this something you knew? What stood out to you? What do you think? What's going on? Then I gave them a little survey. I asked them to answer honestly, just kind of keep it. Then I gave them a handout of fixed mindset statements that I had been gathering the week before of things that I had heard them say in class. And as a class, we analyzed Is this a true fixed mindset? And how could we come up with a growth mindset alternative statement? And ask them, how can they rephrase their statements about what they do well or not do well into growth mindset? Then I did a daily reflection. So every single day, they had to complete this before they left. So what is an example of a fixed mindset statement that they heard or said in class today? How could that fixed statement be changed to a growth mindset statement? On a scale of 1 to 5, how fixed or growth mindset do you feel about Spanish? What can you do today to grow in Spanish? What was today's learning target? And give one example that shows your current progress on reaching the learning target. So on the first day of reflections, 100% of my students correctly identified a fixed mindset statement. 36% of the students were able to change it to a non-specific but positive growth mindset statement. 64% of students were able to change it to a positive growth mindset statement and were able to add steps, methods, or processes for achieving it. So I asked them to tell me one thing that they can do, one thing that they love, one thing that they believe, one thing they do well, and one thing that they are as a person. And then I made a word cloud of the result. So we reviewed their answers for both grammar and growth and fixed mindsets, and we identified and adapted any fixed mindsets. And with this word cloud, I literally made a gigantic poster in class. And anytime anyone said a fixed mindset statement from then on, I just pointed at it, and the kids over time actually started to correct each other. I then asked students to identify or define what makes a good mentor. Okay, I asked them to identify one issue or problem in their life, could be personal or academic, that they want to improve and explain why they want to improve it. Then identify a person who could be their mentor. Why do they admire them? How can he or she help you grow or improve? And write 3 questions to this person. So what do you need to know about this person or this problem in order to be successful? So I asked them to write a letter in Spanish to this possible mentor, compiling all that information, and they turned them in, and I actually mailed them to the people. And I was genuinely surprised by how interested my students were in learning about growth and fixed mindsets. And it ended up being a great way to continue to review present tense, which they were struggling with, before moving into past tense. So really what I want to focus on is growth mindsets can be taught. And students who have growth mindsets will be more willing to participate in the struggle or challenge of learning a language and less likely to give up or be defeated. So when we have those students who shut down on us completely, we need to really question and think, what kind of mindset are they in? Are they willing to learn and grow, or are they struggling because they just are in that fixed mindset and they're stuck and they don't see a way out without losing their sense of self-efficacy? Students with growth mindsets are going to focus more on proficiency and less on grades. This is one of my favorite aspects about proficiency grading. If you're not in a district that does proficiency grading, please find one. It is such a liberating, incredible experience. When we do proficiency grading, the emphasis is always on the end product, and it doesn't penalize students who struggle and get bogged down in the beginning. We can't expect our students, especially novice students, to be perfect right at the onset of language development. Just because you taught it and spent some weeks practicing it, it doesn't mean that your students will be able to replicate it immediately or perfectly. This is where you need to think hard about how you grade in your classroom. You need to make sure that your grading practices facilitate growth mindsets. Are you creating an environment where students have the opportunity to take risks and stretch themselves and struggle and grow and work through it and fight through it? Or are you expecting perfection and penalizing them academically for falling short of that perfection? One assessment in a single point in time has little value for understanding someone's ability, let alone their potential to succeed in the future. Yet many common grading practices do just that. I would encourage you to open your minds about your grading practices and try to find ways to be more holistic, and perhaps even open dialogues with your districts about moving forward towards proficiency rating rather than traditional 0 to 100 scales. According to Carol Dweck, the idea that one evaluation can measure you forever is what creates the urgency for those with fixed mindsets. That's why they must succeed perfectly and immediately. Who can afford the luxury of trying to grow when everything is on the line right now? But don't forget, students have to first experience success before they can anticipate future success. Be gentle with your fixed mindset babies. There's a saying, becoming is better than being. But the fixed mindset doesn't allow people the luxury of becoming. They have to already be. They already put in an inordinate amount of pressure on themselves. They could have an inordinate amount of pressure at home. Help them to grow to love the learning experience, but don't cripple them with it. Focus on small, incremental things that they can work towards. Students with a fixed mindset tend to give academic success the power to measure their most basic intelligence now and forever. They give academic success the power to define them. That's why success is so important to them. If they don't have it, who even are they as people? Our students who come to language classes bitter and reluctant to try, those are often the students with fixed mindsets who struggled in the beginning and cannot perceive any value in trying in a subject that burned them in the past. It's our job to break through this mindset and get them to realize that language is never perfect. It's messy. It can be manipulated. It's always evolving. Learning a language does not mean being perfect in the language. It means finding the means to find a new, better version of yourself through a new cultural lens and embracing the means to communicate this new you to the people you meet along the way. So think back to what you wrote down at the beginning. How are you approaching it with your students? How is your grading practices enabling or fostering a mindset? Is it a growth mindset? Are you all about the struggle and the beauty of this moment and the frustration and working through it and finally reaching that success? Or are you requiring that your students be perfect from the beginning? How do you feel when it doesn't work out? What do you do when it doesn't work out? Are you giving up and moving on and saying that those that will have it already have it? It's their responsibility to catch up. I would challenge you to feel those emotions in that moment again and think about whether you yourself are in a growth or fixed mindset in that moment. It's so easy to make excuses. It's easy to feel frustrated, to be afraid of trying new things when there are so many variables outside of our control, especially now with all the craziness of COVID-19. We don't even know if we're going to be in our classrooms in the fall. I would encourage you to approach each teaching moment, and in particular, each teaching failure, as an opportunity to grow and adapt and continue to encourage and inspire students to struggle and ultimately write their own definitions of success. If you're interested in learning more about this, I would highly recommend that you get Carol Dweck's book about Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. Also, a lot of what I learned about working with students came from Francis Marion's Center of Excellence. Also, I would encourage you to attend SCOLT 2021. I'm sure I will be there presenting something, and I would love to meet you guys. So please feel free to reach out. And thank you for being a part of this experience. I hope you found it valuable, and I look forward to interacting and communicating with you and getting feedback about this presentation.